There are some truly wonderful Wisconsin expressions that I've become accustomed to hearing. After 10 years of living here, I even find myself using them too. Bubbler is a delightful expression. A horse apiece is now my favorite. It's so much easier than saying 1/2 of the other. But I was ill-prepared for a term that caused significant confusion. When Lauren was pregnant, she, like many pregnant women, had cravings. And one craving that I particularly enjoyed at the time was a craving for hamburgers. I did not object to the many visits I made to a local hamburger joint to bring back burgers for us to share. But on one such visit, I had a challenging run-in. I paid for the burgers in cash and was handed a receipt. But I realized after the transaction that I needed the cash for something else. I told this to the clerk, and I asked if I could have the cash back and pay for the burgers using my credit card. And the clerk looked at me and with a completely straight face and with no hint of sarcasm at all, said, "I'm sorry, but once the transaction is completed, I can't open the register. Perhaps you should find a time machine." Now, I had read H.G. Wells's Time Machine as a child. I'd seen the movies too, but I was dumbstruck by this comment. I looked at him and he looked at me, and I said, "Well, that seems like a lot of work." And I got nothing, no reaction from him at all. He just continued to look at me while I was waiting for his joke to end. I said to him, "You know you sound crazy." And he looked like he was getting frustrated with me, and he said, "No, you sound crazy." Now, some of you might be catching on that this was an unusual conversation, and some of you longtime Milwaukeeans might know why. And for those of you who don't, I promise I'll tell you in the end, or maybe you can ask somebody who's laughing. But what is important to know is that in that moment, the world just stopped making sense. And that feeling of the world not making sense, well, I've had it now for a couple of years. I, like you, have watched as our world and our expectations for what might be normal have been turned on its head. So on this Yom Kippur, I want to offer you some advice. It may seem a bit unusual, but I think it might provide us with what we need to transcend this extraordinarily challenging time. Here it is. Perhaps you should find a time machine. I know, strange advice, but let me explain. During our high holiday services, there's a refrain that we hear over and over. Hashivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva chadesh yamenu kikedem. We also sing these words as we return the Sefer Torah to the Ark each and every Shabbat and holiday. Chadesh yamenu kikedem have always been words that I find particularly meaningful and poignant. They are, renew our days as in the past. It's a plea through time. We are looking to the future, asking for renewal, but we are also looking to our past for inspiration to light our way. This is a chaotic time, and we need to find a path into the future. But the only way we'll get there as a people and as a community and as a congregation is by understanding from where we have come. Marshall McLuhan, a wonderful academic scholar of communications, once shared this truth. We drive into the future using only our rear view mirrors. So let us take an imaginary time machine back to understand where we might be going. Let us imagine our first stop in the year 70 of the Common Era in Jerusalem. It was a time of destruction. The people of Jerusalem were under siege by the Romans, and it seemed that all was lost. The Talmud described the scene. The revered Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai came to the realization that Jerusalem was going to be destroyed. And so the rabbi took the bold step of escaping in a coffin through the walls of the great city, pretending he had died. Perhaps a part of him had died with the tragedies that he had seen within the walls of his beloved city, the total collapse of his society and way of life. There was disease and infighting, mistrust and enmity. There was anger and hatred aimed beyond the walls, but also aimed within. But when Rabbi Yochanan emerged on the other side, he knew he had to pivot for the sake of his people. and plot a path for Judaism. The future depended on it. So Rabbi Yochanan found the Roman general Vespasian, the man who lay siege to his home, and he spoke with him. Through humility and flattery, he convinced Vespasian of a compromise, and they worked out a deal. And through that deal, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai abandoned the political seat of power in Jerusalem and established a new center of learning in Yavne. This challenging story, set amidst one of the greatest tragedies of our people, has impacted us in profound ways. We are the spiritual inheritors of the Academy of Yavne. Yavne was where Rabbinic Judaism, the Judaism that we are familiar with, began. This was where our way of life that centers around the Torah was uplifted. And while the sacrificial rites of the great temple and the political royalty of the past burned within the walls of our holy city, this was the moment where our religion truly became portable, and we have spread out all over the world, from the trade routes of Rome and beyond. We bear the scars of the collapse of Jerusalem to this very day. And yet, despite the tragedy of it all, the loss and confusion, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai charted a course to the future. And he did so by pivoting when it was most necessary. And we have survived because of that decision. We owe who we are to the decisions of one man amidst challenge and tragedy. We owe our existence to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's ability to pivot. Now let's take our time machine to a little over a year ago. Who would have believed that our community would have faced a pandemic that would rock the world? I never, in my wildest dreams, could have imagined creating High Holidays, the movie, last year, conducting life cycle events over Zoom and services over YouTube. I never would have imagined the successes and the failures of our efforts amidst a suddenly vastly different world. But like Yavne, we pivoted. I also didn't imagine that the High Holidays this year would still occur under the specter of COVID. A hybrid service allowing for so many of you to be at home spiritually with us tonight, along with those of you here with us physically. Yes, this most certainly feels different, but pivot we have, and we will continue to do so. What has allowed us to adapt so readily? We are a people of historic adaptation. We are a people of the pivot. Yavne was a moment in time, but we could have just as easily had our time machine stop at the expulsion from Spain in 1492, the creation of the printing press, the enlightenment of Europe in the 17th and 18th century, the founding of the United States, the founding of the State of Israel, the civil rights movement, the rise of modern feminism, the rise of the acceptance of the LGBTQ+ community. Each of these events have shaped a Judaism that is well equipped to meet the changing nature of our world. We are the people of the pivot, and we have renewed our days as in the past. That Ner Tamid hanging over our heads, the eternal flame, it has shone brightly for millennia, because with passion and creativity, we have kept that flame alive. So turning our synagogue into a television studio, we did it. Finding ways to manage this hybrid world, bring it on. And there are 3 reasons I have such confidence today in our community. The first is that we are a people who do not stem the tide of history. Rather, we ride on its crest with Torah in our arms, always willing to make it relevant for the next generation. For when every generation, every person meets Torah in their own way, then we keep the Torah as a living document, and therefore we keep Judaism as a living religion. The second reason I'm so confident is that we bear the values of those who walked the world before us. No matter what vehicle, stories, laws, or ritual, our values have been passed in a sacred chain of tradition from one generation to the next, right up to us in a time in which we need our core values the most. The third reason I'm so confident today in our community is that I know you. Today is Yom Kippur. It's the Day of Atonement. And while it is a day to review our actions in the past year, so too it is a time to review moments throughout our lives. This sanctuary on Yom Kippur It is a moment out of time. It is, in essence, a time machine. Let each of us ride that time machine back to explore from where our individual strengths might come. In each of your lives, there are moments of heartbreak and triumph. There are moments that bring with them strength and vulnerability. There are moments when you overcame challenges that you never thought could possibly be overcome. Each of us has personal moments like Jerusalem burning, moments of deep challenges and pain. And each of us has felt moments where we transcended those challenges of our world. We have striven for a better life for ourselves and for those we love, and each of us has had to change our plans to meet the reality of our present day. I want you to close your eyes and think of all of those past events that have prepared you for right now, for this moment. Think of the strength and the goodness that you bear and you bring to bear into the world. You have been preparing for now, this present moment, your whole life. And now you're ready to chart a path to what comes next. We have been through a challenging 2 years, that is for sure. But we have dreams for the future. Now, after all that we have transcended is not the time to stop. This is Congregation Shalom's 70th Yom Kippur service. That's truly meaningful. I wonder if we were to get into our time machine and travel 70 years from now, what would we discover? Here's what I believe we would find. Jewish life at Congregation Shalom will be different than it is today. There will be new rituals and new practices. The people in the sanctuary will most certainly have changed, and the world will be ever changing with them. There will be times in which the sanctuary will be a haven from the inevitable winds that will drive society onward. And there will be times when the voices from within this sanctuary will demand that we change to meet the needs beyond the windows of our congregational home. Through time and event, we will pivot again and again and again. We will adapt and grow and meet the needs as they come. And the inheritors of our faith, the inheritors of Shalom, will look forward with hope and renewal, all while looking to the past, looking to us as examples of what it means to pivot, to change, while holding tight to our values, and therefore to be a light to guide their path. They will place the Torah in the ark and look above to the light that will never be extinguished, and they will say as we do, Chadesh Yamenu Kekedem, renew our days as in the past. There will always be times of confusion, and sometimes it won't be as easy to transcend as the day at that hamburger joint when the man across the counter finally figured out that I wasn't from around here and explains that a time machine is what people in the region called their ATMs when Time Bank, spelled T-Y-M-E, made them available to the public decades ago. No, he was not suggesting that I get or build a time machine to fix the error of paying in cash. There's a funny little misunderstanding, but sometimes the confusion in our lives won't be so easily allayed. It will seem insurmountable. It will feel as though the future is uncertain and filled with twists and turns, but we are a people of the pivot. We are practiced at bringing forward our core values while adapting to meet the needs of every generation, and each of you has the strength within to persevere, come what may. Yes, we are driving into the future with only our rear-view mirrors, but they are mirrors that reflect our strength and our resilience. They reflect our hopes and our aspirations. They reflect who we are and who we are becoming. Let us travel on into that future together. So let this year, 5782, be one of flexibility and inspiration. Let our 70th year be one of renewal and vision. And may this year be a year in which all of us look deeply into the past we share and the past that is ours alone, and see the strength that lies within, and look forward with confidence to face the promise of a new day. Ken Yehi Ratzon. May this be God's will.